This is Block 10, the 1960s, Section 1, A Critical Elite, with this section with Joseph Heller's Catch-22. Many of the novels that began to be written in the late 1950s started to be highly critical of American middle-class life and American middle-class bourgeois values. One of the more famous was a novel called Catch-22 by a guy named Joseph Heller. It's a novel, it's very funny, it's very well written, that satirizes, creates satire on the military and bureaucratic mind that was so prevalent in the 1950s. It was an organized decade, it was an efficient decade, it was a decade populated by 13 million men that had served in the armed forces, and that military training obviously drove in a large part the culture that was created. A stickler for the rules, the bureaucratic mind, where things are, have to be just so and in a certain way, and as long as they are just so and in a certain way, everything will run smoothly. That's kind of the bureaucratic mind. And in Catch-22, the main character serves in the Army Air Corps during World War II and encounters this kind of ridiculous paradox, and the paradox about the war. And the paradox is as such, and it makes total logical sense. Start with the fact that if a person is insane, the Air Force won't let him fly dangerous missions. That the Air Force is not going to have insane people flying, bombers. Kind of makes sense. But then Joseph Heller says a person who is sane will not want to fly dangerous missions. That if you're sane, if your head's on right, if you're thinking correctly, you're not going to want to fly a bomber on dangerous missions over enemy territory. And if you and number 3, if you recognize that dangerous missions are dangerous, that makes you a very sane person. If you look at the bomber and say, if I fly this bomber over enemy territory by enemy fighters and enemy air-to-aircraft guns, that's dangerous. That makes you a highly sane person. But if you are sane, then you have to fly dangerous military missions, which is insane. But if you cannot recognize the fact that military missions are dangerous, then you're insane. And if you're insane, you don't have to fly military missions. And that's kind of the humor, the ridiculousness that kind of undergirds the entire novel. The satire goes from there. In the end, the kind of depressing, message of the novel is the individual person is completely powerless and can do nothing in front of the massive impersonal forces that are arrayed against him. That if you want to complain to the United States military that flying dangerous missions makes you insane, and if you're insane you don't have to fly them, you're not going to get very far. Anyone who's ever tried to fight or argue with the bureaucratic mind knows exactly what Joseph Heller was talking about here. There's a novel that pokes fun at, kind of the overall cultural milieu that's going on at the time. Kind of a harder satire was Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, which is a very good book, a very funny book, kind of a crazy book. It's a lot more explicitly anti-war, and I'm going to kind of explain, Slaughterhouse-Five to you, and you're going to say that's the most ridiculous sounding novel I've ever heard in my life. Slaughterhouse-Five, explores the themes of fate and free will and the lack of logic in the world through the eyes of an eye doctor who gets kidnapped by aliens, and aliens make him jump around through time between his dull American suburban life and his fat wife and his, his nasty, children, between his kind of suburban existence and his time as a prisoner of war during World War II. And what the author does, what Kurt Vonnegut does, is, he takes the reader to a place where the modern world and everything, that kind of is normal in the modern world is made to look ridiculous, made to look false, made to look, like it doesn't make sense. And again, it's another criticism of American middle-class life and values, that, they're material, that they have no deeper meaning, and that, you can't achieve any sort of real happiness by chasing those values. And the fact that those values are the values that are encouraged makes society false, is the argument that's made.